Thank you for joining me for this session. There are handouts on the resource page, which include my contact information if you want to get in touch. Thank you to Emily Van Len and the staff of NAAEE and the rest of the Natural Start Conference presenters for putting on another wonderful conference. This session is about our journey as a school, or maybe even my journey as a teacher learner, and finding our way again during COVID-19. When introducing myself professionally, I will often say that I'm a second career teacher learner. I went from being a scriptwriter, video producer, and don't look for any evidence of that here. Those chickens have flown the coop. I was drawn to learning and teaching over 25 years ago, joining the cooperative school my children attended. And I truly found my passion for living and learning. Then, about 7 years ago, because of a truly wonderful class of children with needs that could not be found within our play yard and building, we started spending whole class sessions outside our gate. And here I found a third phase of my career, thanks to these children and their families. They found grace and beauty that simply was not available to them indoors. It was outdoors in our urban nature setting. Then, over the past 2 years, I've worked to decolonize the adult and child curriculum we have at our school. This fourth phase of my career feels truly satisfying as it encompasses and embraces every aspect of my work and play. And in the meantime, during this conference, I visited the conference bookstore and discovered there's a book to guide me, done and done. It's being shipped to me even now. It's called Decolonizing Place in Early Childhood Education, Indigenous and Decolonizing Studies in Education series. If you also want to check it out, I can't wait to get it into my hands. This session, What We Left Behind, Finding a New Path in Urban Nature, looks to question what are the things we can leave behind. Over the years, the teachers at our school have collected an embarrassingly large amount of materials, equipment, furnishings to support a gaggle of activities and needs. The school's been operating since 1942, so I want you to just think about how much stuff we have. Everything was earmarked and familiar. When the pandemic forced us to close school, it broke our hearts. It did. The children and adults lost something that felt like the single most important tether to normalcy. Healing and connection is now our focus. It doesn't need bells and whistles. It doesn't need curated collections or rooms filled with furniture. These are the things we left behind. What we need now are waves to the bus drivers and mail carriers and their beeps in return. It needs the greetings shouted from apartment windows and learning the names of the neighborhood dogs and cats. It's the communal sharing of fresh baked cookies gifted to us by a local restaurant. It's the warmth of the sun, the play of the wind, the passing of clouds, and the bracing rain, and even the snow. I have a set of slides which are snapshots of our pursuits that told me to let go, let go, let go. Before we get there, though, let me paint a picture of what we had. Our curriculum is shaped around nature, art, and play. Those are like the high points, I guess. This only tells part of our story, though. It is a part-time, partial week program. We are limited in enrollment and hours because of our physical indoor space. The number of children who can attend is measured in square footage and minutes of the day. For this reason, the teachers have curated materials and pursuits that fill those minutes and use the space to its best advantage. We want everything to happen for these children. For what we viewed as a whole child-led, play scaffolded, with a special focus on building the languages of art, movement, and music. Such a list. And as you can imagine, we layered what we thought was innovation and all-encompassing pursuits. We wanted everything. Then, March 2020, we closed, as so many others did, because of COVID-19. We held our collective breath, figuratively and literally, as we had to imagine some way to get the children back to school. We moved to an all-outdoor model and reopened in fall 2020. Our children and staff had to be fully masked, even though we were outdoors. Before school began, the families and I began an overhaul of the play yard. We removed some of the play equipment and added canopies. We built outdoor cubbies and installed outdoor sinks and outdoor toilets. I thank my lucky stars with the networking offered by Natural Start. There was so much to learn. Our state wouldn't allow for our model of parent involvement in the classroom. I didn't have my usual partnership to bounce off ideas with parents while on site. I couldn't turn to someone and say, what did you think that was? Did that work? Did that not work? So it was really helpful to have a cohort of educators through Natural Start going through the same thing at the same time. Initially, we dragged things outdoors. I had a second teacher instead. We had to hire more staff, and we would drag stuff out and we would drag it in. But I quickly found out that our renovated bungalow was actually just a really big closet of stuff we don't really need. I went through my photos. Interestingly, this year I took fewer photos and videos. I was just so grateful to be with the children, I can't even tell you. These photos, though, that I did collect captured the moments that I treasure. This title slide shows you a moment in time which I treasure. It began the story of reflection for me. The photograph here of a cold, cold day in February of the sun hiding behind a cloud was a week-long planning session. It actually began with a windy day the week before when the children said, let's go to the Carroll Avenue Bridge, which is a high bridge that spans the creek. And it was a very windy day, and they wanted to feel the wind against them as we crossed the bridge. And it was the scariest thing I've ever experienced to watch these children being buffeted by the wind on this high bridge. We could only make it maybe 10 steps on. I started crying. I had to get the second teacher to bring what children she had led them first. Her fear is a lot less than mine. I was holding one of the boys' hands, and we were both actually crying that we had to leave the bridge. So, as a way of healing, practice healing and addressing our fears, the children, even those who wanted to go back to the top of the bridge on a windy day, all decided that they would work together to go to the underneath of the bridge to try to investigate how tall it was off the ground. So we were walking down the hill, and you can see the cloud above the apartment building is hiding the sun, and the children were constantly looking for the sun on this day because it was a cold, cold, icy day, and the children knew that the sun would warm them. So as we walked down the hill, they were watching, tracking the sun going in and out behind the clouds. So we were along a new stretch of the creek that we hadn't been to yet. And there you can see on the left-hand side, the children are pointing up to the cloud that is again hiding the sun. They were all counting. They all started counting as one. 1, 2, 3. And I didn't really know what they were doing, but they were all doing it. And eventually the sun came out from behind the clouds, and they all shouted, it was a 32er. We made the sun come back at 32. And it was at that moment that I said, wait a minute, we're doing everything that we should be doing. The children are living in the moment. I think that this is our constant pursuit of trying to train self and the world to be with us all at the same moment, and the children were there. And the photograph on the right hand side is the bridge, and I wish that the photograph would have captured how when we turned from counting the sun coming out from behind the cloud, we turned to look, and there was the bridge, and the sun lit the bridge up in the same way as excuse me, as it had the snow on the ground. It was a wonderful moment. There on the left, you'll see the bridge, and those of you who are in urban settings, you can see that we also have artwork, which I celebrate as artwork in our community there on the bridge's base. And you can see how the sun lit up the snow and the ice on the other hill, and the all the wires along. And this is like one of the things that the children are always looking for. They're looking for the wires and the roadways and how the light changes it. And then there on the right, the children are sitting down and they're drawing the arches of the bridge. And here it was truly, truly on this day, I said, this is everything that we need. Everything we need we found when we walked outside the gate, and we weren't afraid to go and climb on rocks and wait for the sun to come out from behind the clouds. So about in February in earnest, I started thinking, okay, you know what? We have an opportunity to rewrite our curriculum, rewrite our pedagogy, just readdress everything that we're doing in our day. And we knew that sense of place and sense of self are important. Finding ourselves in the world and finding ourselves with others is was always one of our goals. So it fit so perfectly in the world that we found ourselves in. And then I added this idea of place-based education where I said, wait a minute, we have really, I always thought that we were part of the community, but I didn't really know that we hadn't really truly embraced it until COVID happened. So in city planners will tell you that you can measure the health of a city or of a community by the presence of children in that community. And this was something that we didn't really have. I mean, we kind of went out of the gate, but we didn't really stay outside of the gate. We didn't walk in the community. And our sidewalks, our neighborhood is walkable. And we we started walking out in it. We started looking at the construction that they were doing. We started looking at the way that the city was planned and the way there were green spaces tucked in here and there. So when looking at whole child education, we think we're educating the whole child, spirit, body, mind, and we used to think that we had to construct these activities. We had to fill these activities with materials. We had to collect them. We had to shape them. We had to, well, not overtly shape them, but actually offer the platform for which these things would take place. And so here we were constructing obstacle courses and and offering, materials that the children could sort and count and everything. And so we had this whole entire school filled with materials that offered those activities. And what we have found is that there was no longer any need for them. Everything that we needed was outside. And I'm talking about our playground structures too. So if we thought that we had to offer climbing by putting a climbing structure in, a slide and a climber, why do that when there's a tree outside or there's a cliff to climb? We call them cliffs, but they're hills. The thing that really resonated with me, though, is that all the manufactured environment, the curated materials, everything could not compete with actual experiences. So we know that story builds memory, and memory is built with senses, and these create story. This is what we saw. So fear and anger are memories, sense memories that are very easily activated because they involve the whole body. What we learned this past year is that in order to create memories that are comforting, memories that are built that continue learning, we had to build sense memories that were shaped around that. So one of the things that we did with the children, or we didn't even do it, it's like just because of what we were seeing and experiencing, the children were able to build sense memories. The teachers too. I have them as well. That's why I have very few photographs, because I was living in the moment with the children, and the children actually and truly lived in the moment and built memory, built story, and continued their stories. I had to build this in retrospect almost because in the moment we were just trying to keep the children safe and happy in the beginning. But I realized that actually we built a practice around building story and building this memory, the sense memory practice. And one of the things that we did is that we always looked at the sky. We looked to the sky. We were looking for warmth. We were looking for wind. We were looking for Sister Crow. So it just so happens that the children here are looking at Sister Crow. We called her Sister Crow. And we would have these crows that would fly through and interact with us. And the children always looked for them. So basically all that we had to do was go back and build story around that. So Sister Crow, she comes to visit us and she drops us food as we're eating snack, and this is a true thing. So the children look up because they can interact with her, they know her. So after that, then the children actually knew other creatures that lived in the yard that were below us. So first we looked at the sky above us. We looked for weather changes. We looked for the sun. We looked for the friends that we had. We had vultures that would perch on that back. If you see that shed there in the back that's painted blue and orange, which by the way is now gone, but we would have a black vulture, a rare black vulture that would perch up back there while the children were at school. We look to the ground below us. So there on the left-hand side of upper left, you can see children walking in an apartment building parking lot. We started this walk with chalk on a rainy day. On rainy days, we always left the school, rainy and cold days. It's never good to just stay in one place. So they started this walk with chalk that they were tracing which way the water would run as we were walking. As you can imagine, the chalk only lasted a minute because the water washed it away. The actual chalk, not the lines. The lines stayed actually for 2 days. But the chalk was quickly used up. And then after that, they just watched where the water was running. This parking lot was one of their favorites, and they actually asked to go back often when it rained because it would come down in waves and rivers down this parking lot. And in this way, the children were like, instead of just climbing a hill, they were investigating that hill. And as we know, if you can do a whole child development, physical development, climbing and watching and being in this rainy day fulfilled any of our expectations as grown-ups learning alongside children. There on the lower left-hand side is a muddy hill on an icy day, and this is a cliff. The children call it a cliff, and it's an abandoned building site that the children were playing in. And so we have everything you would want there. We have social emotional development because the children are partnering. They're having physical exploration as they're sliding down the hill and trying to climb back up it. They have all their senses engaged. The iciness of the air, the muddiness of the hill, the shouting and the going back and forth between them, the negotiations of here, let me help you, how fast we can go. There's everything you could imagine. There on the right, running along this place that the children call the big lawn, there's no access to that expanse of grass in any of our yards. In our own backyard, in the children's backyards, they don't have it. This is a college campus nearby. It has this great lawn, I'm sorry, and they call it the big lawn. And the wind pushes the children always fore and aft. They love running against it. And when I was watching the children one day, one of the children was rolling, doing a log roll, because automatically you see grass and you think roll, run, tumble, which is exactly what they did. And at that moment, I said, why do we have tumbling mats back at school when we have this expansive lawn? And that was the day that I decided to donate our large mats to a school in need. Shaping story in our place-based educational pursuits is key. It's one of the things that we won't abandon. So it became really important to help the children create story, embody their stories, and just be in their stories. So in retrospect, some of the things that we did to help this along is that we had uh, activities that were based that I won't give up. One of them is recording journals, and another one is um, our circle time stories. So the children will tell stories about the weather using these weather dolls. And we also have other pursuits during circle time meetings that will just basically give the children the language and model this idea of sharing and embodying story. On the right hand side, upper right hand corner, you see some leaves and uh, 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 rock that the children were using to create artwork, actually. So it's like those become stories themselves. So there's constantly this idea that that nature, that the ground is talking to them, and that they are using those materials to talk back to the earth. On the lower right hand photograph, you see children crossing a crosswalk, and they, of course, are looking for traffic. I am holding up traffic, but as humans should be doing, is checking for their own safety. But the neighborhood sidewalks and crosswalks tell their own story, and the children are part of that story. So all this whole time, this last year, road work was going on. It's very, very loud in our neighborhood because of the road work, the tree work, and then eventually the cicadas. I'm pretty sure that I lost hearing. But the children interacted with the construction of the neighborhood streets as if they were an integral part of its coming into being. So they learned how crosswalks are painted with small glass beads. So because of this, the children are engaged in their community in a way that makes them part of the fabric of that community. They are very safe because they start seeing the pieces that are on the ground and then are above. We look for paint colors on the sidewalk. We tune in to where the yellow of the curb is. We tune in to where the crosswalks are. We tune in to all the different ways that the community marks it's safe to keep people safely walking along its streets. And I know that sometimes people ask me, do we have partners or holding hands or using ropes to walk them along our busy street? We are a busy street. And I say to you, no, because I'm trying to keep the children all away from the street. So this is about shaping the story of safety and shaping the story of imagination. So in doing this, we also talk about how we share the sidewalk with other people. We do not own the sidewalk. We have to be able to say that we need to step aside so that other people with strollers and their dog walking and everybody has a space to share. We quickly learned that there was no need to bring things from inside out to create beauty, to find beauty. So up on this left-hand side, you can see that there's flower petals placed very carefully around a blue spot in our parking lot. We painted these blue spots for social distancing or physical distancing. I'd like to say, I don't like to call it social, but anyway, physical distancing. But the children were, as we were waiting to go somewhere, the children used one of those blue spots as a background for something quite beautiful. And then you can see that on the lower left-hand side, they're building a village. It's actually a cicada village, drive-in snack cicada village, um, using sticks and grass and rocks. And there on the right hand side is one of our forest destinations. It's marked by the boundaries are marked by crocheted blankets that we sewed up onto the trees. And so that way the children know where the boundary is. We are bordered by very busy streets, even though we have this green space. That particular green space is called the Blue House site, and there's a neighborhood up above it, and there's a busy road below it, and then there's of course the creek. And in our situation, the creek is quite polluted, so our interactions with it are limited. Um, the thing is that there were so many moments in time where sense memory could be built, and you can see these in little moments if you think about the meditation and the intention that has to happen in each one of these experiences is great. And it's not that I brought the materials out or I found the materials and offered them. I didn't do that. The children found them themselves, I guess, except for the crochet blanket, of course. At one point, we were out on a rainy day in a beach forest. It's a beach, we call it a beech tree nursery, and the children call it Eagle Forest because they found a flagpole with an eagle on the top of it one time. It's that, which is now gone, but we still call it Eagle Forest. And it was a really rainy day. It was pouring. And beech trees, as you know, have smooth bark because they drink so much water. And the water comes down in rivers. And at one point, down the bark, and at one point, one of the children said to me, Leslie, I really, really want to go home. And I said, I know, I kind of do too, because it's really wet today. And the children were actually catching the water in the waterfalls and drinking it from the beech tree. And I said to this child, I said, you know, next year we'll be in a different place. You'll be in kindergarten, probably in a kindergarten classroom, we hope. We don't really know, but hopefully inside of a classroom. And you can think back on this day when you were drinking cold, clear water from the edge of a beech tree, from the bark of a beech tree, and you'll remember this day. And if we were home, we wouldn't have this moment. And actually, like a week later, this child said to me, remember when we were drinking rain from a beech tree bark? And I said, yes, yes, I do. And if we build sense memory so easily with fear and anger memories, imagine if you practice whole body, whole senses memory building that involves drinking cold, clear water from a beech tree bark, and that could sustain you during rough times in kindergarten. I think our job is done. One of the things that I was really worried about in this past year, at the beginning of the year especially, was the art part of our pillars of our foundation. And we pride ourselves in supporting pursuits, the language of art, and all the many languages that could be presented through visual art and music and movement. And we have a studio inside our school that is devoted to these kind of pursuits with clay and oil pastel and tempera paint. And we had, of course, put out easels, which I actually adore. I have to tell you that if you have a chance to bring easels outside, you should. And because the sun and the light and the shadow on an outdoor easel is just, unless you have a beautiful studio space, it just can't be replicated. Anyway, I was worried about this, and then I started thinking about liminal art and about experiential art. And I realized that just once, when I opened my eyes and looked around and could see that the children were actually finding ways to express themselves without my intervention, without oil pastels, without tempera, I could see it happening. So the artists that I really resonated with me this last year when I was remembering is Marina Abramovich, where she would sit at she has an installation where she would sit, and people would come to her and sit across from her, and they would without words, they would commune and communicate. And it's very stirring. And that's one of the things that I just looked at. I started looking for it, and I didn't have to no, I didn't have to look hard. I found it everywhere. The children actually found color and light really interesting. And so they would do things with leaves all the time that would shape and sculpt and interact with the nature that they would find. We have a poem about fiery leaves that we say in the fall, and the children were always on the pursuit of fiery leaves, which they would say when they found one, like a, a fiery leaf shining with the sun behind it, that was like the ultimate thing. And whenever they would find these, they would pick these leaves up, any that had been abandoned by the bush or the tree that they found, and they would carry these leaves around and position it so that the sun would be behind it. They were really interested in like manipulating those things and finding those things, and would ask me to take photographs. So the one on the left with the tulip poplar leaves, that is one that they asked me to take because they could see the light shining through the overlap and the shadow. And there on the right, we can see the beech tree, one of the beech trees, and the leaves that had fallen with all different colors, and the children would constantly rearrange those into shapes and rainbows. And in this way, I found out that like we don't have to actually have all those pieces. It's nice. It's icing on the cake to have all those multiple languages, but here the children find their own ways to express themselves. This was one of my favorite photographs from last year, or events, I should say. I got to document it. It's Letter to a Bird. And what happened is we were at a storm drain, actually. We were looking for a cat that we would see all the time. There's a lot of feral cats in the neighborhood, and this one was especially gorgeous, like fluffy, fluffy hair. And they'd seen it when this cat has actually lived in the neighborhood for several years, but the children know it, so they wanted to go down to this area to look to see if we could find it again. They had seen it recently, and they just wanted to stay at this culverty, like rocky drain place for a bit, and they started collecting things. So you can see in the lower part of the photograph, there's two sticks lined up, and actually that's four. The photograph didn't capture the four sticks that created a box. The children will create these, they call them treasure boxes, and they'll fill the inside of those four sticks with things that they find: broken glass, broken ceramics, and they have an opinion about what is more precious over one, and ceramics are usually the most precious. One of the things that they found while there was this piece of scrap paper and a feather. And so the child got down to the business of writing this letter to a bird, she said. So she's writing this letter to the bird, and it was, and she narrated it outside. Dear bird, we are here at the ditch looking for the cat. We think that the cat is a nice one. So that's what she's writing. And in the meantime, I just want to direct you back. I like to say this as much as I can, is that broken glass is a constant in our urban setting. Broken glass and just garbage, right? It's a constant. And I think that it's important for me to say, as a white woman, that if I said something to the children about, oh, look at this and how it, if I even talk about the glass in a negative way, children as mathematical thinkers will hear this from a white woman, and they'll think, who's left this garbage? Who was the bad person that left this glass or broke this glass? And they will see it as the opposite of me, because like I said, children are mathematical thinkers, and that could be a male. It could be a person with a different skin color than me. It could be someone, I'm older, so it could be someone younger. And that creates a scapegoat. It creates a boogeyman that doesn't actually exist, because this is what happens with glass. The thing is that recycling and garbage and all that kind of stuff is not available to everyone, first of all. So, and also, when the garbage truck goes through the neighborhood, a lot of it flies out. The children talk about it all the time. It's like once you're out in the neighborhood, you actually see how the neighborhood works. The other thing is that when there's stone or there's concrete and there's a glass in a hand, the stone or the concrete says, how will I sound when you break the glass on me? And the person holding the glass says, I don't know, let me find out. So that may be what happens. And that is the story that I tell the children, that stone says to you, break the glass. What will I sound like? And the children get that. They understand that when glass breaks, it could be gratifying. The stone could say, break that glass. But now, instead of the story of where they're saying that it's some person that made a bad decision or some person that is not a good person, then what they're saying is, oh, I actually have control. I know what happens after you break glass. It's there on the ground. I don't need to break this glass. Now, this may not be universal, but it could be a start. Back to the story at hand. So, the girl wrote a letter to the bird, and now the bird writes back. We couldn't find a second feather. You can see that the original drafter of the letter is holding the feather. But imagination is wide and deep. So this child found a larger piece of, and it's not a paper, it's like that I don't know what that is, foam, floppy foam, packing foam. She found this piece and she picked it up and she read back what the bird wrote back. She said, "The bird, I'm fine. Thank you for the letter. I live in a tree over the culvert and I am not afraid of the cat." The neighborhood offers us so many surprises and so much joy. So the bird letter was one, and it shaped story. And now the other piece that shapes story is just the ways, the streets, the shortcuts, the different trees, the different that they would navigate around the neighborhood by tree, by corner, by by stories that they began to hold inside them. So this is one of the destinations that they always like. There was two actually shadow walls. One is this fence that's at the edge of an apartment building, and the other one is near a hospital. And it's these great walls that offer so much in the way of shadow. So if I think, oh, am I actually providing the children with poetry? Am I providing the children with movement? Am I providing them with paint brushes to change and to see? And you can just see that in this photograph, shadows offer all of that shadow play. The other thing is that one of the ways that we navigated through the neighborhood was with the smells that would come from Mansakunda, a restaurant near us. Each morning they would cook their curries, and you could smell it from a block away. And the children knew that when they smelled it, they knew where they were. So we would often try to get lost. That was one of our goals, was to get lost as we were walking, and yet we never did. So when we were able to navigate by the smell of Mansakunda, we knew that we were a block away, and the children, they didn't necessarily know which direction to walk, but they knew that they were close to where we needed to be because Mansakunda's smells were wafting towards us. And in doing this, it's like we got to wave to the people once the restaurant got to open back up and they were having uh, outside seating. We got to wave to the customers. We got to know the owner, and the owner would bring the children cookies occasionally. And of course, the staff especially enjoyed the food from that restaurant for on cold winter days. I can't tell you how gratifying it was to have some good stews in your body when it's cold. Recommend it highly. So, in the way of practice, I wanted to come back to this. The idea that an urban setting is accessible, it is also has limitations. Those limitations we actually got around, you know? So when I go to nature trainings and they talk about sit spots and about finding your space, it was very, very hard in our urban setting because it's of how loud it is. When you look at this photograph, if you look tiny, tiny, tiny there in the center, there's actually a person doing tree work. And I have to tell you that this is both inspirational and overwhelming. The sound is overwhelming because of the saws that are constantly going and in the fall. But inspirational in that look at that person climbing that tree. The children were fascinated. They were fascinated. They had to watch it because this was not like this person climbed that tree and they are really, really high up. And it just so happens in our urban setting, we do have a lot of trees. Tacoma Park is known as Tree City because they're very protective of their trees. And because of this, there's a lot of tight growing trees and they can't bring in like a cherry picker or anything. The tree crews that work around us are very adept at climbing trees. That's how they take care of them. So the children are mesmerized when this happens. They're mesmerized. They watch this person climb trees. They watch how this person navigates that tree, and it becomes a meditative practice that moves beyond the quiet of a sit spot. I don't have to create it. The moment created itself. Now, we did go around and watch them grind the tree because that's the loudest thing of tree cutting is the grinding of the tree. And the children came back afterwards and created their own story of a tree grinding machine out of all the loose parts that we have in the yard, bike pieces, crates and stuff. And they each work together to like create these tree grinding things that ground the branches and the sticks that they found in the yard. So this little event creates the story that you need. I don't have to create, I don't have to make it. I didn't have to bring anything out. I didn't have to show them. I didn't have to read a book about it. It created itself. Story, sense memory, whole child, it's built near as well. The photograph that you see here is actually forsythia blossoms in steeping in hot water. We made forsythia tea in the springtime. And the children gathered around to watch how the yellow of the forsythia blossoms that they picked slowly melted into this hot water and took on like a greenish bluish tint from the sky. Again, this is story. This is coming into balance with your environment. So the yard itself, even in our urban setting, offered so much in the way of nourishment, both body, heart, and mind. So we have a Kusa dogwood tree, and in the fall we had dogwood berries to eat. The children loved them this year. They were delicious, especially, and I don't remember them ever being that delicious, but they were. And this is when they got to really know Sister Squirrel and Sister Rat, because they also enjoyed the dogwood berries. And we had we have redwood blossoms in the yard to eat during the springtime. Mulberry leaves all around the neighborhood. I mean, not mulberry leaves, sorry, mulberries all around the neighborhood to pick and eat. And then we had these forsythia blossoms as well to make tea with. And this is in the springtime, so tea wasn't as necessary. In the winter, tea was a staple, and they all have their favorite teas that we would buy because of the stories that they told, like tiger tea and lion tea. And so teas themselves become both sustenance and story. So when you think about whole body interaction, whole body sense memory building, you know, taste and becomes like, it was harder for me to imagine, but I realized again in retrospect that there were so many opportunities to actually build that, including just eating snack outside, creating a yellow jacket altar for the yellow jackets that came by. The children would take little pieces of their snack and set them on a plate nearby. And the things that they tasted were also the things that the yellow jackets tasted. And in that way, they formed a strong connection with those creatures as well. And we got to learn about our groundhog that lived in our yard, and it left, because it's the one that came by to eat the salami out of the yellow jacket sister altar, and it left its little greasy footprints on our slate walkway. So we got to watch our groundhog as well. There's so many different things that we learned about where we are and who we are that we'll just never go back to the way we are. I really want to stay outside. We have now pulled out our slide platform, our seesaw. We removed play equipment. We kept the sand pit, the two playhouses. We've built a large deck that will serve as an outdoor classroom, partnered by a new shed, which will hold hollow and unit blocks and give us all-weather easy access to drawing materials and the children's journals. There was so much I wanted to get rid of, and we got rid of it. We knew from the first week of school that having a floor that lifted us up off the ground, out of the mulch, out of the mud, out of the rain, would be useful. We know that the deck will get muddy. We know it will, but we won't be walking in rain anymore. And we know that trees can give us climbing. Lawns can give us running and tumbling. And we know that the creek will tell us how fast the water has been running. We know that the rain will tell us that it's time to move. And we know that the gates are there, always open. We know that the sidewalks welcome us. We know that the neighborhood welcomes us, and we welcome them back. Thank you so much for letting me share. Thank you so much. And if you have any questions or want to continue the conversation, please email me at romanoff@tpcns.org, ROMANOFF @tpcns.org. And if you're ever in the suburbs of Washington, D.C. and Tacoma Park, just stop by and visit us. The school is Tacoma Park Cooperative Nursery School, and the bungalow will stand empty and we'll be somewhere outside. Thank you.